Now we're doing the NFC East, starting from the bottom up. New York Giants. Draft needs everything at this point, right? I mean, it's and I loved how this was like it's a funny thing because when you're the GM of a team, you have to play the game, and sometimes you can sort of trick the media. Not trick is the right word, but you can use a convincing set of arguments to say like, we're doing a really good job here, and now here's where it turns the corner. And I think Shane's thing this offseason where he said, "Wow, I had to draft for need in so many of these drafts because of what we were left with, and now we have the chance to pivot." It's like, I don't know, man. It still looks to me like you're drafting for need. I see a lot of holes on this roster. I mean, gosh, where do we start? I mean, the Giants need a quarterback. They need offensive line help. They need help for Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line in the interior. They need a linebacker. They need a couple wide receivers. Like, this team needs everything.
And that's why I think if you're them, you are praying that Travis Hunter makes it to you.
Right?
Because like I just think Travis Hunter would help you address multiple things at once, however you want to dress that up, whether you want to start him on offense and moonlight him on defense or the other way around. You got needs on both sides of the ball that you can take care of with one player. And, I think you're going to make your quarterback better by doing that, whoever the quarterback is. And you have a chance to maybe push Deonte Banks and get a little bit more out of him finally. I think like the idea of that makes the most sense. I do think they'll take Abdul Carter if gun to their head.
I think so too. Why wouldn't you?
And I don't hate the idea of it. I mean, remember, this is the franchise that drafted Matthias Kiwanuka when it had Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck, and Osi Umenyiora on the roster, and then did the same thing again a couple years later.
Jason Pierre-Paul.
With Jason Pierre-Paul.
Yep.
So like, this is a franchise that's done that before. I also think, and this is the interesting thing about Carter, you could theoretically play him as an off-ball linebacker, which is a need of yours, on early downs, and then have him kind of as a jack of kind of like a movable piece in the nickel. And can you imagine if they had like, what you call like a NASCAR package with Burns, Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Carter on third down? Like, that sounds pretty good to me. That's going to make the rest of your defense better. So
it sounds good.
I certainly think like whichever one of those two falls to them, this is the one they take. And I think like if for some reason the two of them both made it to them, Hunter makes the most sense.
It's going to be so annoying because on draft day, when they take Abdul Carter, right, there's going to be the mind-blowing emoji. This is my favorite thing. You and I talk about it all the time. Who is going to stop the Giants now? It's like Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter. It's like, well, probably a lot of people, because a lot of people stopped the two of them last year. It's not like,
Well, let's dive into the quarterback thing then. I mean, what, second round?
If they took a quarterback at 3, that would be a catastrophic, franchise-destroying maneuver.
Well, did we game this out did I do this with you? Because I did it with a couple of people. Did I game this out with you, like how it makes no sense for them to take a quarterback anymore?
It makes no sense for them to take a quarterback.
Like, look at how, like, if you were going to build a quarterback room for a rookie quarterback, is that how you do it?
Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson with Tommy
not
DeVito.
Only Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, who have never had highly drafted young quarterbacks behind them, right, have spent 90% of their careers as starters, right? Not only that, but on contracts that are heavily weighted on playtime.
Yep.
And so, like, to me, it's like, okay, like, so maybe you do that and redshirt the quarterback, but would it make any sense for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll to draft someone 3rd overall they're not going to play?
No. It never has.
It doesn't. It
never has. That's why it drives me. This whole thing, it's
the
crazy
Shedeur
to me.
thing is going to be so interesting on draft. I mean, it's. I'm telling you, like, I think it's going to be. It might wind up being the story of the draft is Shedeur Sanders sliding. And can you imagine What?
But it's not a slide. It's not a
It's
slide.
not a
Like
slide.
it's not a slide because
It's
he
what the
never.
NFL. Yeah, it's because the media is, and I'm part of the media. The media took a while to catch up to how the league really views him, and that's the shame of it, is it makes it look like the kid's stocks collapsing when it which just was never in the place that a lot of people were putting it in the first place.
I put, like Daniel Jeremiah does a great job. He's my
Yeah.
favorite draft guy, and he had Shadur Sanders, I think, generously listed as his 20th best prospect on his top 50, which is revered around the industry.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so people are saying he's going to slide to the Steelers, but that the Steelers are picking at 20. That's where he was, that's
Yeah.
where a lot of smart people thought that he was in the context of this class. And if you add in the fact that, yes, he's got a famous parent who's probably going to verbalize his disappointment when he's not playing, that's going to impact your draft stock. It always was. It always was. And so that's built in. I'm so glad, by the way, because I think I said on this podcast that I would sell my house for $1 if the Giants drafted Shadur Sanders. I said on another show that I'm a part of, Heed the Call, that I would eat a jar of olives live on YouTube on draft night if they drafted Shadur Sanders. I hate
Oh man,
olives.
now I have to root for it to happen.
I hate olives. Um, it just was
How big a jar?
it never made sense to me. It never made sense to me. Can you imagine?
How big a jar?
I went with I
That'd be a bad job by Dan Hanses if he didn't specify
the
the
biggest jar.
size of jar.
It was one of those like the ones that you would get for like a family of four for like taco night or like to make like a salad,
Okay.
But because I hate olives, I can't digest them. I think they're absolutely disgusting. I think it's garbage food. But can you imagine putting that on Brian Dable's plate then, and then saddling the next coaching staff with that? If this doesn't work out for Brian Dable and Joe Shane, like, no, I think this is your fastest path, Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, to a season where you look kind of spunky and you win 7 or 8 games,
Yeah.
and then you figure it out.
And then you figure, yeah, and like next year, it looks like
Then you trade up.
next year, yeah, like next year, you look at it and you say, okay, like now we've got something, and you never know, like another Matthew Stafford type of opportunity could come along where it's all right, like now we've got something to sell a veteran quarterback. Like I do think like Stafford's mindset, like if in January, if the Giants were like 9-8 last year, I think like Stafford had been sort of pushed to the point where he might have considered, as much as he like loves living in California and likes playing for Sean McVay. I think if like the Giants were winning and they were, again, say like 9-8 last year, that might have played out a little bit differently. So you do have the potential to take advantage of an opportunity like that if you could just start winning, which I think you add a Hunter or a Carter and you're going to give yourself a better chance to do that.
I think my dream scenario, if I'm the Giants, is that I get Travis Hunter at number 3 or Abdul Carter, really. I mean, like that feels like a situation that you can't screw up because you just take the one that the Browns don't take, right?
Mhm.
And you still have a potentially generational player that can help your team right away. And then in the second round, you are able to get one of those guys on the fringe of that tackle class, maybe someone with some interior versatility just to compete. And then maybe you make it back up into the second round again and you end up with someone like Jalen Milroe, who you can run in like a red zone package, something like that this year. And let Brian Dable cook with him just a little bit, because there's some stuff that he can do with the read option offense. There's some stuff that he can do in the RPO game that's interesting, and then kind of let him develop in the background, and I don't know. I think that's attractive to me. I like that. Next up on our list, the Dallas Cowboys, 7-10 last year. New head coach coming in, Brian Schottenheimer. Where do you see Dallas? Do you look at this as a situation where, I mean, is it skill position, skill position, skill position? I mean, do you need someone? Javonte Williams is currently your RB1, I guess, or Miles Sanders, which seems like a little bit of a running on fume situation. You don't have anybody next to CeeDee Lamb that really scares anyone. and your defensive line historically, and your linebacking core, which was 5, 6 years ago, was really good. All that stuff's kind of decaying too. So what are your thoughts on that, on Dallas in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in general, picking 12th overall, they typically don't pick this high, so I don't think
They're right on the fringe of relevance in this class, right? Like
yeah.
12 seems to be like that's where the cliff is, right?
Right, like, the second cliff almost, I guess, after I think Hunter Carter, look, there's a cliff after that, and then
Right.
maybe the second cliff is right there, so I think you have to get a guy that you think is a difference maker, so, like, maybe it's an edge rusher, to put in there, and, they brought back Dante Fowler, but, like, do they have a whole lot else to threaten losing DeMarcus Lawrence with, opposite Micah Parsons? I don't know that you really have like that guy right now. So if a Mikael Williams makes it there, do you take a flyer on him? Do you look at Ashton Genty, who's from the Dallas area? Is Matthew Golden make sense as kind of this burner that you can put opposite CD Lamb? There are a ton of ways they can go with this, and I do think because of the position that they're in, because they do have more than just a couple needs. And this is like, I think this is the toughest spot their roster has been in a few years. And this is the highest they picked in a few years. It's really incumbent on them to just get a difference maker out of this class. I know they've said that with a few of these teams. I don't think they're in like the dire straits that like New England or the Raiders are, where, again, like we just need blue chippers. But because of the age in some spots of their roster, they are sort of trending that way. So yeah, I mean, like is a Mikael Williams a guy that you think playing opposite Micah Parsons could develop into a really great player? If so, maybe you just sit there and take him. Is Ashton Genty the kind of guy that's going to help you settle in with some moving pieces on your offensive line? If so, maybe you take him. Is Matthew Golden somebody who's going to take the pressure off of CD Lamb and really kind of open things up in your running game, because they're not going to be able to creep towards the line of scrimmage anymore? That's something to consider. I just think finding a difference maker, again, like it's a different spot than Vegas or New England, but sort of the same idea. They just need to get young blue chip talent onto their roster.
This is not going to happen, but it's just going to be fun for me to bring this up. Micah Parsons is at the Star today. Probably won't leave with a contract. I wouldn't practice if I were Micah Parsons without a contract. Let's just say Jerry Jones is like, I just want to completely blow this thing up. Let's say, okay. And you're like getting towards the beginning of the draft. And one of the interesting things that I think not a lot of people talk about is when Richard Thaler and all those guys did that seminal paper on the value of trading assets for draft picks. One of
Yep.
the things that wasn't really discussed in the paper was the extreme value in delaying your gratification and trading for picks in later drafts, because teams are more willing to sacrifice something that they can't put their hands around, right? This
Yep.
class is somewhat underwhelming. You don't really know what's going to happen. And every class is a mystery, certainly. But do you think you could get 3 first-round picks for Micah Parsons if you put him on the block right now? Or let's say the clock starts ticking.
Maybe not quite, just because I think you have to consider that you have to give him a contract now, and that and he's going to have a lot of leverage if you're trying to negotiate a trade. So, I mean, what are you talking about? Like maybe 42 million a year, right?
Mhm.
So it's a combination now of, now we're not just looking at giving up the draft picks. We're looking at pulling multiple levers here, and like and giving up assets on both ends of it. So I think you get 2 first round picks and then some for him. I don't know about 3. 3 seems rich to me.
Okay. I'm just
Well,
curious. I didn't know if you
you do figure it's like a bad team isn't going to bring him in, right? So like probably the team that would bring him in, whoever it is, um, say it's Detroit, right? Like, you're talking about end of the first round pick. So maybe that
feel like
tips the scale a little
Chicago,
bit.
you know?
Chicago?
Like so you can move up 2 spots this year and then you get 2 ones after that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something that they would do. This is like one of those like asinine scenarios because it's absolutely not going to happen. And Jerry Jones is not going to miss out on the chance to tell someone that he signed the richest non-quarterback in NFL history. This is something that he lives for and probably creates because he delays the signings of these
Yeah.
so many times. But I don't know,
I
man.
was gonna
Like,
say, I was gonna say, I was gonna say, what about Philly? But
oh my god, that
the
would be
Cowboys
so
won't trade
funny.
him to the Eagles. I had that thought, like, well, the Eagles, and then I was like, yeah, the Cowboys never trade him to the Eagles. But yeah, I mean, I like Chicago again. Like they're already really invested on the edges. So then, do you play Micah off the ball, like what we just talked about with Abdul Carter? Do you play him off the ball and move him around, or are you getting the most out of him if you do that? I don't I don't know about the fit quite as much there. Um, what about the Chargers?
I mean that's the thing, right? But then you're expecting late first round return, right? It's like it's got to
Yeah,
be that team in a sweet spot, where you're like, maybe there's something there. I don't know, but anyway, that's just something fun to discuss. That
yeah.
definitely is absolutely never going to happen. The Washington Commanders, 12-5 last year, NFC near NFC champions, lost to the
NFC
Eagles.
finalists. Yeah.
NFC finalists.
You
That's a
remember
cool
like
banner.
the Colts banners? Yeah. The AFC
Yeah,
finalist banner.
NFC finalist. A lot of movement on the defense this offseason, and you have a defensive line now of Javon Kinlaw, Jerzon Newton, and you have Deron Payne.
Yep.
Is that, do you think, where you go at this point? Because his team's done a lot of work. I mean, Debo Samuel is now in with Terry McLaurin on their wide
Yeah.
receiver core, and then Noah Brown, and then you bring back Austin Eckler. You had Austin Eckler under contract. You bring back Zach Ertz. Uh, you know, what what are your thoughts here? Because I mean, in
So
theory,
this is like
the
flashing lights, like edge rusher, right? Like to me,
yeah,
the team does have, I would say, a few more needs than meet the eye. Like because it did seem like they last year they did a really good job of rebuilding the roster on the fly, and they were able to kind of create a baseline where they didn't have a lot of holes. They may not have been great in certain areas, but they didn't have a lot of holes. But they did it with older players, and some of those guys were on 1 year deals. Some of those guys are gone now. And the edge spot is certainly one of them where you look at it and say, okay, like they're eventually going to have to take care of this long term. So I think the best scenario for them is like that some edge rusher falls into their lap. Now maybe
mm-hmm,
it's James Pierce has the character issue, but he's super talented. Like so does Dan Quinn look at it and say, we've got the culture right. We can take a chance on a kid and roll the dice. If he slides to us, we can be ready to take him. You know what I mean? Like that might make some sense because you'd be able to get some value where like the guy might be a middle of the first round player who falls into your lap. And now you can say, okay, like we've got the culture right. We're going to be able to bring in a guy like that and make it work. If it's not there, Connor, I mean, I don't see a ton of other areas where it's just like, all right, they have to do something. You know what I mean? Like, I like every team could always use some help on the offensive line. So, I guess, they could add somebody there. Depth at receiver, like
I mean,
I
that's a big one because I think aren't your top three of your top four wide receivers are on expiring contracts,
right.
right?
And you assume McLaurin's going to get done. So that's not going to be a problem. But yeah, I mean, that's something you look at. Like, is that Emeka Ibuka, at the end of the first round, who can be a slot for you, and I think a really effective one and be a security blanket, for your young quarterback. Tight end, another one where you look at it and you say, okay, like they're fine now, but what's that going to look like in a couple of years? What are they going to get up from Ben Sinnott this year, who was, one of the guys they drafted last year? So I think, like they've got the one again that's like kind of like in flashing lights, the edge rusher spot. But then other than that, they've also got areas where it's like you may have to draft a year ahead because it may not be a problem now, but it could be a year from now.
I think if you're Washington, the dream scenario has to be, you know, like you said, like someone like Jalen Walker, someone at the edge spot that Dan Quinn can use and start right away. And
Mhm.
then you get that developmental wide receiver, at least in the pipeline, and get him working with Terry McLaurin because Debo Samuel just seems like such a short term rental to me. And then I think you got to hit the cornerback position at some point too, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think that that's one of those spots where, I mean, you have Sandra Still for your second round pick last year. But again, I mean, this whole thing needs to come together. I think you need some depth at some of those critical
Yep.
positions. Last but not least, the defending Super Bowl champions, Philadelphia Eagles, 14-3 last year, Super Bowl. This was it's a difficult win the Super Bowl offseason where you lose your offensive coordinator. You have to pay Zach Bond commensurate with the top of the league after having him for a few nickels and a pastrami sandwich last year. And yet, I always look to Howie Roseman and the Eagles to say, show me where the NFL is now going. Like, what's your idea? Where do you think the NFL is going next? I don't think this team is without needs, certainly,
Yeah.
but it's a team that probably has fewer needs. Safety, defensive line, cornerback, edge, and then at some point
Yeah.
you have to replenish this offensive line. I don't know. Where do you think they're going
I'd
with
say
this?
edge is probably the one. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like where you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, they lose Josh Sweat, who was a really
Brandon
good player
Graham.
for them. They lose Brandon Graham, right? Like, what do you think Jalex Hunt's gonna bring you? Like, what do you think? Um, I mean, what do you legitimately see Bryce Huff doing for you? You know,
Hmm.
like which I mean was bit of a swing and a miss for them. Is Nolan Smith really going to grow into being the guy? Like I think there are a lot of moving parts at the edge spot. Like, and again, like they're in this position where obviously they've done such a good job building up the roster that they don't really need to force anything. But like you do look at like that one position as like they could do something there. They might need to do something there.
Right.
And then the rest of them to me, it's like sort of like depth, like they're always going to be looking at offensive linemen, no question about it. You can expect that I mean, maybe this is the year they find the right tackle that'll eventually replace Lane Johnson. Um, they could use some more depth at corner. They drafted two guys last year. They did great with those two. They lose Isaiah Rogers. So beyond Mitchell and DeJean, like, are they where are they at the other outside corner spot? So like those are the types of questions, though. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like there's anything here where you say like, yeah, they need to take care of this outside of maybe edge. Like I think they'd like to come away from say, and this is the funny thing about it is like with some of these teams are saying like, yeah, they definitely need to take care of this in the first round. Like it's like it'd be great if they got an edge in the top 100. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's really what we're talking about here. And I don't know. Like they've done such a great job of building the roster. They've got a ton of capital again. You know what I mean? They've got four fifth round picks on top of on top of picks in each of the first four rounds. So they've got some wiggle room to move around a bunch too.
How is Howie Roseman going to do that? Like he's going to do something, right? I mean, the team
Yeah.
just won a Super Bowl. Now I don't know if he's the maybe he sees this as okay, this is the reset year. This is the year that the guys have to kind of develop on their own. We're losing some of the veterans, the important guys, and I mean Brandon Graham's around. He can just come and be in the facility. It's not like you can't prevent him from coming back and being a coach or some sort of
Yeah.
developmental guy like Connor Barwin, whatever. But maybe this is the year that, okay, we reset, we recalibrate, we let the young guys take over. Or is this just another like Howie sunglasses moment where he goes in and breaks up the draft and you're like, how the hell did that happen? I don't know. Where do you see this?
Yeah, I think
Can't count
it's
it out, right?
this just feels like a depth draft to me for
Yeah.
them, because I know what you're saying. Like, do they like is there a big swing coming? I think they've always done a good job of like picking their spots with that, and this isn't a great draft class, or it's not seen as one, and it's seen as one where you can really make hay at the end of the first round where they're sitting, and on the second day you can find starters there. So like I got the way I look at it for the Eagles is like, yes, they've always sort of they always find a way to stay loose for the big swing, when it's there to be taken. I just don't know that this is the year where you want to be taking the big swing, which is fine.
How
which is fine. They don't
Yeah.
need to take a big swing,
It's fine. It's just
They
not
don't need
like how I don't know. It's just not like Howie Roseman, you know?
I mean,
I
I don't
always
know.
look at like I mean, it is,
This
right?
just does not feel like the year, you know what I mean?
Right. It's just, I don't know.
And
There's
here
gotta
we
be
go, and
something.
they're gonna wind up trading up and getting, like, freaking Travis Hunter now that I said that, but, like, like, it just does not feel like the year you would do it.
Like, there's so like, I don't know. There's so many good like, next year's free agency class is shaping up to be pretty solid. And this is before, like, a lot of, contracts and a lot of stuff gets done, and
Yeah.
the Eagles certainly have guys of their own to sign, but, like, gosh, what if they were the ones that came away with Trey Hendrickson in all this, you know? What if they
Yeah.
were the ones that
That's not the
I don't
worst
know.
idea in the world. I mean, the one thing I can be concerned about a little bit is like, okay, like now you're paying him, and are you paying him in a way that's going to upset your salary structure? That's I think the question that you would have to answer on that. But I think it's certainly something they would take a look at based on the way the roster is set up.